I'm going to call the special select board meeting. Are you running? Great. For Thursday, February 20th, 2025, at the special early time of 6 p.m. to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Moved
Second?
and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Heather?
Aye.
Oh, very good. Unanimously.
I almost didn't have
Uh,
the vote to do it.
The next on the agenda is citizen comments. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to something other than the primary information session on the wastewater treatment facility? Please limit your comments.
Laura Asermely. I just want to say I appreciate the meeting tonight, like that it gives us the space to really talk about an important issue. So thank you for doing that. I think it's really important to provide space and time for people to give good comments and absorb the information. And I am hopeful that our select board continues that posture in their meetings. I think that the last meeting was interesting to me. It felt like comments were being cut off, you know, like that people didn't have enough time to really express themselves as completely as I thought they needed to or they could have. So I was just left wondering, you know, what else was wished to be said that wasn't said at the last select board meeting.
Okay.
So, and I've seen that at other select board meetings. So I'm just saying I noted that. And we want to encourage participation at our town meeting of people having voice, right? And you're wanting people to show up for town meetings. So I just think, let's think about that. You know, so that's just one thing. And so that could mean that, I know we're always constrained by time, but people do take time to say what they have to say. And I hope that you will just balance that. And that's one thing. And then I know that there's a lot of interest in having expression, not just in the meeting, but in the community. And people are asking me about their right to assemble and whether they need to get a permit. And they need a certificate of insurance for doing such a thing. So I'm just informing you that that's going on too. So there was a gathering on President's Day, and they did not pursue a public assembly permit because that was an example that I told them they didn't really need to get a public assembly permit for that, since they're not obstructing traffic. You know, they have the right to just express their view, and so they don't need a certificate of insurance in that case. And if you go into our policy and our ordinance, it's not always clear to people. They don't always know when they need a public assembly permit and a certificate of insurance or not. So I'm just here to say that I think town meeting might be a good opportunity to clarify that for people again, you know, and I would like to encourage you to do that. That's
I think
it.
if anyone has questions about that, you should encourage them to reach out to the town manager's office
Right.
for clarification.
Yep. And we have.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Anyone else with an item that's not on the agenda? Judy, come on up. You're the next contestant on public comments.
I was going to say, this is like a game show, isn't it?
I just made it very much like a game
Yep.
show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, Judy Weiger Groves from the small hamlet of East Middlebury. So I guess the first thing, at what point are you going to cut me off? 3 minutes? 4? Can I just start?
Why don't you start? Do you have
I think I've got it down to 3 minutes.
that'd be beautiful.
Okay, all right. So I won't set my timer.
Okay.
So, as a citizen of Middlebury, I am here to offer feedback on the February 11th Select Board meeting. I zoomed into that meeting to hear the discussion of the Select Board's encampment policy and to hear what Heidi Lacey, Executive Director of the Charter House, had to offer. As a result, I was not prepared to articulate my concerns related to the geoengineering presentation. But I am now. My concerns are these. This forum, designed to be a place of considered and respectful discourse, this assembly where ideas and views on a particular issue can be exchanged in a civil manner, this gathering where our local democracy operates has devolved into something quite different. It has devolved into a place where disinterest is clear on the part of some board members. It has devolved into a place where ideas can be blatantly dismissed out of hand by a minority of members. It has devolved into a situation where at times rudeness, bullying, and patronizing behavior are on full display and accepted. Recently, there have been a number of articles and letters to the editor in the Addison Independent about civic engagement, encouraging people to go to town meeting, wanting residents to become more involved in local affairs, suggesting individuals attend the various board, committee, and commission meetings. One of the letters in today's paper was entitled "Public Forums Should Promote, Not Limit, Discourse." Agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely essential in a democracy. But why would somebody do that? Why would someone who would very much like to express comments, concerns, or questions go to a meeting where they stand a good chance of being cut off, interrupted, belittled, or if they happen to attend on Zoom, be muted? Most people would shy away from an environment where they are treated that way. I mean, who walks into the lion's den purposely? If the governance of the town of Middlebury is to once again operate the way it is designed to, every voice needs to be heard, not just the voices of a few. And all voices need to be heard respectfully, with sufficient time for a considerate, civil, and courteous exchange of ideas and opinions. When that happens, Middlebury will be operating in the manner in which it was intended. Finally, as a gentle reminder to all members of this board and any of the town's committees, commissions, and so on, you all work for the residents of Middlebury, not the other way around. Thanks.
Thank you, Judy. Is there anyone else here for public comments? Seeing no one, I think we will go to our main event.
Okay.
Mr. Rathburn, would you like to?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll get us started. So for anybody who doesn't know, either here in person or on Zoom or watching this on a video later, my name is Jeremy Rathburn. I'm actually the wastewater superintendent for the town of Middlebury. Joining me tonight is Jenny Oster from Wright Pierce. She is the Vermont Wastewater Group leader, and Emily Sherrington from the town of Middlebury, who is Middlebury's Director of Engineering. Also joining us is Dean Rayhume in the back of the room. He is the Assistant Chief Operator for the town of Middlebury's wastewater treatment plant. He wanted to come tonight to show his support for the project. Also, if anybody for the informational meeting had historical questions, he is the one with most historical knowledge of the system since he has worked here 2 decades now, right, Dean? Yep. So we're here tonight to provide information on the upcoming municipal bond vote for improvements to the town wastewater facility. I'll provide a bit of background on the project. Jenny will discuss the scope and logistics of the proposed improvements. And Emily will discuss some of the funding opportunities based on her prior experiences leveraging grants and the like from Middlebury projects. For those who don't know, municipal wastewater treatment first began to be explored in the town of Middlebury just after the Second World War. It took several years of planning before the first plant was constructed almost 70 years ago. Since that first treatment plant, 2 upgrades have occurred, one in 1980, which upgraded the original plant on Seymour Street, and one in 2000, which constructed the plant that we're operating now and which is the basis for this project. Also, for folks who don't know, the wastewater treatment system in the town of Middlebury is a biological treatment system known as a sequencing batch reactor, which uses a fairly low chemical dose for a plant of our size. Our plant works by creating an optimum environment for both anoxic, which means low oxygen, and aerobic, oxygenated organisms, which break down the wastewater. The wastewater is settled, and the clear water on top is discharged through a UV light system, which treats for E. coli prior to discharge into the Otter Creek. We monitor the process through lab work that we perform 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. As a biological process must be balanced, mass in equals mass out. Food enters in the form of wastewater and organisms multiply. We waste out a small amount of this mixture. We then mix this with any waste received from folks who are not on our municipal source system, local septic tanks, and we heat treat and lime stabilize to create what is known as an EQ biosolid. This is then used by a local farmer as a soil amendment. So the plant as designed and as operated, there is very little waste that actually has to go to a landfill at the end of the day. Our process works well, but we have very low TP, total phosphorus, and E. coli numbers, and our solids are low as well. We create a very high quality effluent and a high quality EQ biosolid. The catch is in the second half of that, which is after the but. The process works well when it works. In recent years, we've had compounding failures of critical systems, many of which no longer have spare parts available. These failures make the continuing reliability of the plant more tenuous as time goes on. And that is the point of this project, to overhaul and upgrade an established process that we know treats the domestic industrial wastewater of the town of Middlebury well, and to ensure we continue to provide the utility capacity needed to sustain Middlebury's residential and business growth, while at the same time stewarding the environment through a reliable and effective treatment process before our wastes enter the waters and the lands of the state. That is the point of the project we're going to discuss here tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jenny Oster, and she's going to take you to the logistics of the upgrades we're looking at.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. There you go.
Awesome. In the hot seat. So as Jeremy introduced me, I am Jenny Oster. I am the project manager and also the wastewater group leader for Wright Pierce, the engineering firm working on this project. I'm going to talk through a presentation that was in the packet. Get my glasses on so I can see it. So we're going to first go through, you can go to the next slide, the summary of the need. So as Jeremy summarized, the existing treatment facility was constructed in 2000. All flow to the treatment facility goes through the main pump station, which was also primarily upgraded in 2000. There's a couple pictures there from satellite view of the pump station on the left and the treatment facility on the right. Next slide. So in wastewater infrastructure, there is a known expected useful life. So the typical lifespan of a wastewater treatment facility is 50 years, and that has more to do with your concrete tankage. Upgrades need to happen typically every 20 to 30 years. And this is because of the middle bullet that you need to replace your mechanical, electrical, and process equipment roughly every 20 to 25 years. The other driver that for upgrades is typically to incorporate advances in technology and opportunities for more energy efficient equipment. At the little bullet at the bottom said that currently the majority of the wastewater treatment facility MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and process equipment is 24 years old at your facility. So, the town anticipated this need, has been doing due diligence and studies with engineering firms, taking a look at this starting back in 2021 with a preliminary engineering report identifying the needs and some suggestions for upgrades. Wright Pierce has completed the update, should be updated to the 90% draft that we submitted a couple weeks ago in February, that outlines what the recommended project is that we're presenting today. This process, we include an assessment of the existing conditions, and the majority of the assessed components indicate that a 2 to 5 year life is anticipated remaining useful life in the majority of the process. So this is just a summary table of, we looked at it by process element within the facility and at the main pump station, to identify what we anticipate to be the remaining useful life. So, what are the drivers for this project? On the next slide, age-related needs. As I said, this is anticipated. Some of the photos here just capture some of that need, and Jeremy has also captured well in the YouTube video that the town put together. It's expected corrosion at the main pump station screening room. That's what you're seeing. There's corrosion on the door and the state of the existing screening building on the interior. The controls, which is the backbone of the operations at the treatment facility, are at the end of life and parts are not readily available. Your sludge treatment process, what makes that high quality Class EQ biosolid, is showing significant wear. The lime stabilization process is at risk. And then lastly, we have a photo of the UV disinfection system, which is no longer supported by the manufacturer and unable to get parts. The next driver is flood protection. So the main pump station experienced a flood event where it had catastrophic failure back in 2023, where the pumps were submerged to the point where they could no longer pump. So, as I said, all the flow comes through that pump station, so that means that wastewater that was generated had nowhere to go. So, looking to provide flood protection at the main pump station to mitigate against future flood events. We're looking at potentially putting in flood doors and then raising the generator. So, I'm going to go through overall what the different project components that are included in the recommended project. Just really high level, there's a lot of documentation and more description of what each of these, what is included in each of these different portions of the project. So at the main pump station, what is included is replacing the influent screen, refurbishing the building, flood protection, replacing the standby emergency generator, and hydrogen sulfide mitigation. So it's a hydrogen sulfide that's generated by wastewater, and so it is to mitigate that, so it's a corrosive element that it affects the system downstream. And then moving to the wastewater treatment facility, we're going to start at the front end. So for the septic receiving, so all of the septic that comes into the treatment facility from surrounding areas, replacement of the septic receiving equipment, and then a spill pad for where the haulers come in, improvements to that area to mitigate potential spills. So at the heart of your treatment system, as Jeremy described, is your sequencing batch reactor process. This is an engineering drawing of your secondary treatment. The next slide lists a whole heck of a lot of equipment replacements that are part of that, but this is essentially what is doing the heavy lifting at your treatment facility for the removal of the organics that are come in through your wastewater that needs to be removed out so you can discharge it safely to Otter Creek. At the tail end, as Jeremy said, for eliminating E. coli, disinfection is required. So this is replacement essentially in kind of the existing UV system with a more modern one that is supported by the manufacturer. In replacing that, your current effluent flow measurement needs to be moved outside the building, so a new effluent flow measurement structure. There's overall operation, upgrades to the operations building, the solids handling building, the site, and the generator. These are just overall HVAC, some improvements to the chemical feed and storage area, the solids handling building, just overall structural and HVAC improvements. For the site, some stormwater treatment, and just overall pavement improvements and replacement of the generator. So a big part of this project is the solids handling. So the drivers for this are age-related. So your existing belt filter press and lime stabilization projects are at the end of their anticipated useful life, and those technologies are obsolete now for this application. In other words, this is not what would be selected today. So we looked at a whole series of other options. The other driver is PFAS. So right now the town is able to produce the Class EQ biosolids and have it go to a local farm as an amendment. Costs are going up with solids disposals, and the options are becoming more limited. So an awareness that PFAS could impact, PFAS regulations could impact where you may be able to put your biosolids was a factor that we wanted to look at in identifying what the recommended upgrade would be. So we evaluated 5 different options for generating Class EQ biosolids, and those are listed there. We went through overall life cycle cost analysis for those 5 different processes, where we looked at the heating cost, the electrical cost, the labor cost, the maintenance cost, the hauling cost, because you're going to get a certain percent solids, more dry, less dry, depending on the process, and you're going to have to haul more or less depending on that factor. And looked at this over 20 years to identify what was the most cost-effective for them. We can go to that next slide there, and then to the next slide. So what we identified was that the drying alternative had the lowest life cycle cost. It was tied with the thermophilic anaerobic digestion. However, compared to thermophilic anaerobic digestion, drying is a much more reliable process. It's a much simpler process. It also provides a flexible pathway for potential PFAS removal in the future, in that you need to have drying ahead of pyrolysis, which is a process that could be added after the dryer for PFAS destruction. So having the dryer in place now allows for the flexibility in the future. The other thing we looked at was the estimated greenhouse gas emissions associated with the different alternatives, and drying also had the lowest emissions associated with it of the alternatives. So for the drying alternative, you have dewatering. So the first process, right now your belt filter presses do that, so you'll have a dewatering process followed by drying. That will fit within your existing solids handling building. So we're able to repurpose that space and sequence that in, so your existing system will remain operational while the new system is put in. And that is the tail end of what is included in the project. For context, what are other communities doing? So in comparing to other regional projects, just have a handful here that have occurred either now or more recently, from Shelburne, Virgin, South Burlington, Bartlett Bay, Burlington, and Middlebury. So looked at this on a cost per gallon, per million gallon treated, and a cost per connection, approximate connection. So this is by no means apples to apples. Every project's different, every connection is different, an industrial connection is different than a residential connection. So, but it does give a general view that you're in the ballpark of a similar situation to other communities in the state that are addressing their need to upgrade their facilities as well. So why now? Why are we considering a bond vote now? As mentioned, the age-related needs were anticipated. The town has been aware of the upcoming need for investment and has spent several years of due diligence identifying the needs and evaluating options to make an informed decision on the project that most cost effectively meets the needs of the town. It avoids additional sunk costs towards equipment, so there's portions of this process that we know aren't going to be part of the future of that facility, yet they need to continue operating. So every repair that goes into that, that's sunk costs that are not going to be beneficial in the future. So the longer this goes on, the more sunk costs. We're at the end of what was anticipated of the useful life of these major portions of the equipment. So you're at risk of significant failure if this is delayed for a substantial amount of time. Lastly, on the funding side, a positive bond vote indicates community support that can make the town more competitive for grants. So the bond vote is for the 49, I think you guys went 49.6, is that, we rounded up there, but this was based on the cost estimate that we put together by project element, and then included a bunch of factors. So this is intentionally conservative. So we have a 30% contingency, we have the general conditions and contractor markup, we have escalated it based on a construction cost index that's used in the industry to what we believe is going to be the midpoint of construction. Included other factors like BABA contingency. BABA is what's required. It's a Build America, Buy American provision that's required when using federal funding. And our technical services are just based on the Vermont DEC. The regulatory agency in Vermont provides a fee curve just based on construction costs. Those are not actual costs. Those will be figured out as we get further along in the project. So the anticipated project schedule. So we are finishing up the planning stage, which identified the project and got us to the point of bringing the bond vote to the town. We'll move into permitting and final design, which will take us to the early part of 2027, where we anticipate the project going out to bid. We anticipate a 2-year construction period. Following that, there's a 1-year warranty period before you start paying on the bond, and with the bond payment looking to be sometime in the tail end of, initiating in the tail end of 2030. Just to think about how does delaying the project impact costs. So inflation, the longer you wait, the costs are going to go up. Increased cost of operations, again, those sunk costs are going to accumulate over time. There's the potential for increased cost of solids disposal. So right now, the town pays your local farmer $20 per wet ton for taking away the biosolids. If that process were to fail and that we're no longer producing class EQ biosolids, that it would likely go up to somewhere over $200 per wet ton overnight. So that's a pretty significant budgetary impact.
And that's the cost of landfilling rather than spreading.
Yeah, and it's landfilling, and it's tough to find a contract, and there may be other options too, but it is you go out to bid for a landfill and see where you land. So, and then, for Dean and Jeremy, operator fatigue. So, part of this is you have your boots on the ground environmentalists here protecting water quality in your community, and it becomes more and more challenging as parts of the process need more babysitting, there's more failures, there's more alarms, unplanned time at the plant. And Emily's going to go over this more, but there is the potential for grants on this. So the Vermont DEC has the Clean Water SRF pollution control grants, and those have to be funded by the legislature, but they, by how that is written, projects are eligible for 10 to 35%. And your project, my guess is it would be eligible for somewhere in the low 20%. Could be higher, but somewhere in that range. But again, that has to be funded by the legislature. And then because your engineering services were selected based on a qualifications-based selection, You do get a discount on your engineering services, and that's a guaranteed. And do you want to talk through these on
Sure.
the FEMA?
FEMA, so I've been working with FEMA, feels like daily, but I guess maybe it's more like weekly. I'm currently working with 2 different hazard mitigation groups regarding the main pump station. I think we're going to try to split the project apart so that we meet the threshold that we're able to apply for. And so I think we're in pretty good shape to get the flood doors and the floodgates through one of the programs, and then we'll be submitting the generator platform through the other program. But it seems like it's moving in a positive direction at this point. There's always a lot of conversations involved, so it could be years.
Just for sizing, how much are those projects of the total?
So those are I think the doors we estimated, they just worked up an estimate last week and it was $365,000. There are potential structural improvements also needed for the building to be able to withstand the hydraulic capacity against it. So that's a slight unknown until we really get deeper into the engineering. So FEMA, I think we're in good shape there. Northern Borders, obviously this is the grant that we received for the water tank, which is still an active grant. The submission for this one, there's a pre-application due in early March that I'm intending to submit for. But if you have an existing grant through them, you have to submit a waiver if you're not at a 75% complete level for the initial one. So I have a feeling we're probably not going to get funded in this round, but the water tank, we're opening bids tomorrow. And so that's proposed to go in the fall, start fall, and then construct next spring. So, next cycle, we're in pretty good shape for that funding. And I think this project will meet the criteria of that program, especially we're already a regional plant because we do take in septage from the surrounding communities. If we expand our solids handling process to also support other communities, that would also help build leverage for that funding. I think the typical funding is $1 million for infrastructure, but it could go up to $3 million, I think, if you're really if you can prove the regional component of it. So that would be a really good one to get. Congressional spending, obviously in flux. We don't know. Everything's day to day. I mean, even Northern Borders is federally funded 100% also. So even a couple weeks ago, we got the notification that they were not releasing any funds, but then they got allowed to start releasing again. So everything's in flux, but we just have to keep going with what we know and what we can apply for.
Sure.
So we'll go after congressional spending, obviously. I think last year we were really close with the water tank and getting it. We made it to the final round, so I think again, this project, especially if we're supporting a regional community, that one, and any congressional spending, if you can show more of a regional demand, then you look better on that funding source. You went through the other ones pretty well.
Yeah.
I think that just the major piece to reminder that whatever we can do to remind the community over these next weeks is that the intent of this bond vote is so that we can leverage these other funding options and these other grants. A lot of them you can't even apply for if you don't have a positive bond vote, just as a show of community support. So I think if anybody out there in the crowd, whatever you can do to help spread that word, that's really the most important component of it.
About out of the 50 million, what is the potential grant we are hoping to get? Dollar amount.
It's really hard to say, Farhad, because we don't know. Even so, just in applying, I just submitted the pollution control grant, the SRF funding. Those applications were due last week, and I feel like we were in the 15% range. But will also change depending, like, it's all still just so malleable at this point that I think the very conservative estimates that we first ran had maybe 8 million or 9 million coming in from funding. But there's no guarantees.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
At least if we have a number that we might be able to get up to that much, it's helpful to.
we might be able to get higher. I mean, realistically, I mean, if you take the water tank, for example, we went after the SRF funding and didn't quite qualify. Got the Northern Borders grant, so we decided to go for it with the project. And then just last month, we qualified for SRF funding also. So, like, everything fluctuates quite a bit, even after the initial SRF funds are released. There can be movement even then.
Select board questions first?
When you say it's a conservative estimate, what do you mean by conservative? Is
The main is 30% contingency added to every element of the project.
Okay.
So by the time we get to the end of final design, that contingency goes down to 5%. And what that includes is, what's that intended to include is this is a planning level document. We haven't dug into all the details. By the time we get to the end of final design, we should be able to
Right.
know every valve, pipe,
Right.
and whatnot.
Right,
So
but this estimate here, you're being conservative means you're confident that you're not gonna exceed that number.
in the last 10 years, I would say I could never be confident that there's so many factors. You know, I think I had a contractor last week say a project that just came into bid for one of our projects in Maine. They indicated, the general contractor said that they had marked up a significant portion of the project because we anticipated tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that are really outside the control of what a cost estimate can provide is, those are the caveats.
The current estimate also has a 15% contingency on construction.
Yep.
So when she says conservative, she's hoping
Right.
that it's a high, but it won't actually cost us that much.
Right,
But
that's
there's
what I was getting to.
a lot of variables in that.
That's the intention. As we work through the design process, we'll work with Emily and Jeremy and Dean and the whole team to identify, the goal is to have the most cost-effective process. And as we go through the decision-making of different equipment and the details of it, our job is to present those alternatives. And sometimes it's worth it to spend it a little bit more here, but sometimes it's totally acceptable and you'll get just as good a product by spending a little bit less here. And that's our job, is to bring that to the town for that decision-making throughout the design process.
Thanks. For the select board, this is our third or fourth bite at this apple, including some lengthy tours of the current wastewater plant and becoming very aware of the deficiencies in the systems there. For those of you who are spending your Thursday night with us, I'll welcome any questions from the public. Yes, Laura.
Laura, certainly very clear, good presentation.
Thank you.
Like, I'm certainly convinced. I've known that for a long time, having been on the select board before too. And is it true that the wastewater treatment facility is the biggest electric user of the town?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. You know, so that's and I know that you stated this in the presentation, that we would gain energy efficiency by doing this project, which we care about. And I see that members of the Energy Committee are here, right? And that that you also included their participation, and I'm grateful for all of that, and that they're in support of this decision. I know that originally we were hoping that we could do a project where the wastewater treatment facility could actually produce energy, not just create energy, but I understand the rationale for this decision based on everything you just said tonight. And is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's still potential avenues for geothermal, but it'll be down the road in that conversation.
Okay.
This is more like the immediate age-related need.
Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Laura. Come on up.
Good evening, everybody. Dan Rafferty, member of the Energy Committee, and yeah, I just wanted to state I really appreciated that you guys supported the engineer doing the greenhouse gas estimates, and then that the treatment method chosen was one of the lowest ones out there. So I thought that was very thoughtful and great to do that ahead of time. It does look like there'll come a time where choosing the power source for the heat could be electric or natural gas, and in Jenny's estimates, natural gas about 8 times higher emissions than the electric for the plant. So, as design goes forward, hopefully we can manage the electric side of things. In my opinion, that'd be better. But yeah, just largely appreciating the analysis. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a couple tiny little nerdy technical questions that I got from your presentation. The first was that you called the sequencing batch reactor the secondary treatment. What's the primary treatment in our town's wastewater?
You have screening and grit removal. So in a wastewater process, there's the upfront part where you're removing inert solids. So that's actually at your main pump station. So that fine screen, and then behind the fine screen, we're not touching that as part of the project. There's grit removal. So that's your front end primary treatment.
Gotcha.
Did you go in that building? You went in
Oh,
there,
I
right,
sure
on the
did.
tour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I just did the terminology.
Yeah,
that's all.
no,
I'm just
yeah.
interested in the terminology.
No, that's fair.
Yep.
Yeah. Another question, I saw the number 12 MGD on the UV system, which is a large multiple of our capacity.
So with a sequencing batch reactor,
Yes.
what is happening is you're storing it in that batch, and so the disinfection system needs to be designed for that peak flow out of that batch, not the average flow, because you need to be able to treat that maximum flow rate.
Sure.
So that is why that is a factor well above your permitted capacity.
Yeah, this is why I did preface my questions as being a little on the,
All good.
on
No,
the
no,
technical
good.
side.
That's
The same thing. And he showed me on his computer the spikes
Sure.
that happen in flow.
Yeah.
And in a large rain event, for example, the 2.2 million gallons a day is an average over the day.
Yeah.
But it actually spikes up and down in commercials and football games and mornings.
Yeah, right.
And, but on a big rain event,
Sure.
there's actually a much higher amount that comes, and they have to be able to disinfect all of that.
Right. My third and final question. How do you neutralize hydrogen sulfide gas?
So there's a whole series of chemicals, and I can probably pull up because I'm not going to remember all of them, but it is, let's see.
We went through quite a few options.
And interestingly enough,
Yeah.
we have a group of UVM students also doing their capstone project on that
Yeah.
portion of the
Jeremy's working with-
process.
Yeah, I'm working with
So
this.
as an opportunity to pull in some of the local community, but there's, I want to say that there are like.
Yeah, the students had a nice field trip down last Wednesday for 2 hours, where they actually came down and visited the plant and toured everything.
Yeah.
And that little part of the project they're
You have
pursuing
it
as,
in the
and they'll do their
November
senior
presentation.
presentation on it.
So-
There we go.
Right, it's a gas that's emitted from the wastewater, so
Yep.
you have to move all of the air in there through.
Well, basically what you do is you chemically treat it to turn the hydrogen sulfide into something else.
Okay,
So it's a chemical process.
yep,
Much in the same way that we break up other things when we get into the plant, and is by adding other chemicals, you can then change the chemical makeup of the hydrogen sulfide and change it into something else that's not a corrosive gas.
yeah,
You want the chemical options?
I've got my chemical options here. They're magnesium hydroxide,
okay,
ferrous sulfate, hydrogen peroxide, and dioxide. And each of them have different, chemical costs change all the time. So we're looking at the cost per gallon. We're also looking at the handling. So how safe is that versus, something that you don't really have to think about as much? And can the temperature effects, can you have a tank outdoors, or do we need to have a whole in temperature controlled space for the chemical storage? But that it will be injected at the pump station in the liquid.
Yeah.
The liquid injected into the wastewater liquid.
Thank you.
But it's kind of neat, Andy, because the professor is a gentleman by the name of John Lenz, who he used to be an engineer with a geotechnical firm, and I used to build projects with him when I was an engineer.
Cool.
And so now I'm a wastewater superintendent, and he's a professor, and we're working together again.
I like that. Excellent. All right. That's all I've got. Other questions, comments, and concerns?
I'll share that I asked a question of Jeremy, he gave a really good answer to it, so
I'm sure.
it's all right, I'm gonna ask it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The town has to do this. It's not like we can not do it and dump wastewater into the Otter Creek. But the bond amount number, as large as it is, and even with breaking it up, if, God forbid, we weren't able to secure the voters' approval for this, we'd obviously do the best we could, but what does it really mean?
It means that what it means is that you're still going to have to do everything eventually, because we have to treat our wastewater. What it would mean would be the project would have to get broken up into several smaller projects. They'd have to be done over a longer length of time, and we'd run a much larger risk of a catastrophic failure that would lead to very high costs for emergency repairs if we don't try to tackle this all at once. You got to figure, right now we're at 25 years, right? And we're talking about a lot of our equipment has 2 to 5 years lifespan. But as you saw from that schedule that was just presented, the project will not be done until almost 2030. So we're already pushing it, right? And so if we keep kicking that can down the road, we're still going to have to do all this anyway, because I'm pretty sure everybody in Middlebury wants their toilet to flush and the water to go away. And as long as we want to do that, it means we're treating the wastewater. And as long as we're treating the wastewater, then all of these things will have to be tackled. If we don't do it now, it'll just cost more and take longer, because we're doing it all anyway, one way or the other.
I ran some math out for that, Fred, just looking at inflation alone, and that was pretty devastating. Like, at 1 year, you're looking at a $1.5 million increase, and at 5 years, it's almost an $8 million increase if you delay it. And that's not dealing with the operational side of. And so the legislature did actually introduce a bill yesterday regarding PFAS and land application.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've sort of been like dangling it out there that it would be in 5 years, and it still might be, but it's in the House.
Just as a refresher, how much is the paralysis?
That adds like 10 million, I think, somewhere in that range. But that's not included in this number.
They'll come in the legislation, they'll fund it.
Oh yeah, don't worry.
Every town will get.
Just for clarification, that paralysis, the mention of paralysis is, did I say it wrong?
You said it
Pyrolysis.
Yeah, pyrolysis. Yep.
That part of the process that's not included is designed to eliminate PFAS.
So it doesn't completely eliminate it. It's like 99%.
Significantly reduces
Yeah.
so that the product could still be applied to the land, correct? We hope.
Yes, but the project as designed could have that technology added in the future. And
Yes.
that's one of the ways that we are very excited about the design.
If I could just comment, sorry, Dean, I don't think it can be stressed enough how much additional cost we will see on this project if we don't do it and start addressing these things now.
Yeah.
Emily was just talking about the additional cost for just inflation. It doesn't include additional costs for sunk costs. It doesn't include additional costs for potential, landfilling of biosolids. The potential costs of not doing this are larger than doing this. And I think is really, really important that we stress that.
Dean, you wanna come up? You have something to add?
Just one comment I wanted to make, that doesn't come up often. Whether we proceed now or later, we have permit obligations. Really, really stringent permit obligations. And the longer this goes along, the harder it is for us to stay within those permits. So that's a very, very critical factor
You know,
to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's one of the things that, sit right there for a second, please, I'm gonna talk about you. One of the things that the town is blessed with is they have, you know, they have operators who really, really care about that facility, and we lose a lot of sleep worrying that someday something's gonna break and we're not gonna be able to fix it. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I was on call. I went 2 nights without sleep, dealing with emergency call-outs. Dean just finished an on-call weekend where he racked up
20
hours of overtime in about 3 days between trying to deal with the snowstorm and all the emergency call-outs in the middle of the night. And, you know, and we do that, and we are able to get everything, but what he and I have talked, what keeps us awake at night is getting to one of these things one day and not being able to get it back online, and having to make a call to the state that says, yeah, it's gonna be like 5 days until we can fix this, and you know, and what do we want to do about the regulation now? And that's the thing that I think the town needs to understand is that we have really good treatment, and that treatment allows us to have all the great things that we have in Middlebury. We're able to build new housing. We're able to have an industrial park where we can put new industries and new buildings, but we're going to start losing the reliability if we don't start investing back into it. And that's really what it is. It's an investment in our community. I mean, it's not anything that anyone really wants to think about. It's not the most greatest investment. I mean, I'm sure people are much more excited about the Ilsley, and I don't blame them because I know my daughter is. But at the end of the day, it's just as important as the Ilsley. You know, just like that library is a great thing there for the town. You have that wastewater facility that is there to help support the whole infrastructure of the town. And I just hope folks see it as that community investment.
I think the other piece that's important to remember as we move forward is that we aren't at capacity at the plant itself. We do have room to grow there. And so as developments like Stonecrop come online, that'll be more users participating in the rates and helping bring down the cost for everybody. And we do have that availability still built into the system, which makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I also will just say quickly that I hope as we go forward into the future and we're talking about capital budgets for the wastewater treatment plant, that we find a way to build into the capital budget, addressing age-related issues as they come up, and not deferring as we have in the past.
Budgeting for
Which-
depreciation of our capital.
Yeah, budgeting to address age-related maintenance of the plant routinely. And it will be difficult because we've got to spend this money and then also include money for future aid related, but I hope we can figure it out and talk about it and
I think the
include it.
reality, like what Jenny mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, is that the plant itself, the life expectancy is 50 years.
Right.
So
So next time we
this
get to build a
conversation
new plant. Yeah.
it's not that long before this conversation comes around again and is even bigger because you're looking at.
And now you're talking
replacing
about
basins
the
and-
concrete structures, the actual batch, concrete structures, the holding tanks.
I mean, it is the one really great thing about the design that has been come up with is we're reusing everything we can.
Yes.
You know, we're reusing it. We have a good process. The process when all the valves and everything's working, the process works fantastic. And we're just maintaining that really good treatment by using all of the infrastructure that we've already invested in and keeping it going with refurbishing what's absolutely needed. And we're trying to be responsible as things go offline now in working with the design engineer, even though the design is still in a stage. If there are things that are going offline that we cannot get parts for, we make sure that we're working with the design engineer to go, okay, I'm replacing this. What are we going to replace this with for the plant upgrade? And so basically, as we're spending the money now, we're just taking things off of that shelf that are going to get installed in 5 years and doing them now, so that we're trying as much as we possibly can not to sink any costs going forward. That all of this money that the users are paying is invested wisely in that plant.
Thank you. Jeremy and Dean, thank you for your
Yeah.
dedication
Absolutely.
Yes.
and support.
This plant has served the town well, it's
Mhm.
served the ratepayers well,
Yeah.
but it's time.
Thank you for stewarding it.
I hope a lot of people watch the tour. I have not done that yet.
I haven't done it yet.
The video?
But I took the, yeah, I took
It's
the
great.
extended.
Drew did an amazing job.
Yeah,
Like,
that's,
huge shout out.
that's all the reports so far, but I hope that it gets pushed and a lot of people, yeah, see what's going on. And the great work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for hosting an informational meeting.
Yes.
Hopefully, glad some folks came to ask some questions and save some comments. Hopefully some folks watch it. We'll do it all again, probably in an abbreviated form on town meeting evening.
Brilliant.
And then we'll have that vote the day after.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I am going to close the public hearing, informational hearing, and move on to our last item, board member concerns, starting with Fred.
No other concerns.
Very good. Farhad.
No other concerns.
Very good. Daniel, you're good? Heather?
Nothing.
Also good. I also will stand. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand in recess.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
hosting this special.